Hello. Hello to Seren, Scott, Anjan, Jeff. So here we are, continuing with our journey through Mandukya Upanishad, along with our friend Swami Rama, and what he's calling enlightenment without God, having to do with the levels of consciousness, not anti-God. And anyway, so we are coming on verse 6 of the 12 verses of Mandukya Upanishad, shortest of all the Upanishads, but yet tremendously succinct and high nelly and filled with wisdom. And so we're coming now to the next two verses deal with Turiya. So we went through the ones introducing Om and then talking about the three levels of consciousness, Vaishvanara, Tejasa, and Prajna. And now we start into Turiya. And this particular next verse starts out by talking about the witnesser, the one who is witnessing those three states. So it went through waking, talked about that, then it went through dreaming, talked about that, went through deep sleep, and then it comes to the point, it says, okay, now in those three states, there is one who is witnessing those. And I have a matri over there on the floor with some greenery doing something. Yeah, she says, yeah, I'm doing something. Now, just to get us started here, I'll go back through the verse itself. This doesn't take long. Hello, Indika.
Dutchies represented.
Good Nabin Hashim. The Dutchies are well represented. So, 1, Hari Om. The entire universe is the syllable Om. The following is the exposition of Om. Everything in the past, present, and future is verily Om. That which is beyond time, space, and causation is also Om. So the object referred to by the word Om is very, very big, isn't it? Number 2, all this whatsoever is seen here, there, and everywhere is Brahman. Brahman is simply a word denoting the absolute reality. This very self, capital S self, this very self, Atman, is Brahman, the absolute reality. This Atman has 4 aspects. Now, the important thing about here, discerning between Atman and Brahman, is what you and I do is when we keep talking about center of consciousness, we're wanting our attention to gradually recede inwards so that we can find that center that is within me. And the name, the word that goes along with that center of consciousness is Atman. The beautiful thing is that when you discover the Atman, you discover that my personal Atman actually literally is one with the infinite consciousness, and that's called Brahman. So you don't skip over Atman on the way to Brahman. You discover that they're virtually one and the same. But what you and I look for is it's why is the term self-realization, capital S self-realization, is actually an English translation of Atmajana. Jhana means the knowledge of or the direct experience of Atman. So what we do is we seek to know the center. Now, we read the book and we're bright so we can think about it and talk about it. So we realize, so wait a minute, the closer I get to realizing that capital S self, the Atman, the more I come to realize that everything is Brahman. But you don't seek the Brahman directly. First you seek the Atman. And then playfully said, the magic is that then you make all that other infinite discovery. Anyway, this verse closes with that this Atman has 4 aspects. And that's what verses 3, 4, 5, and 6 are about, are those aspects. So remember, we're just going through this just to get grounded on where we've been. Number 3, the first aspect is the waking state, Vaishvanara. In this state, consciousness is turned to the external. We all know this. It's out here. With its 7 instruments and 19 channels, It experiences the gross phenomenal world, that which is out here, like a ma tree on the floor doing something with those green vegetables. Number 4, the second aspect is the dreaming state, tejasa. In this state, consciousness is turned inward. It also has 7 instruments and 19 channels, which experience the subtle mental impressions. And all of us, you and I, every one of us already knows this, because even if we don't dream a lot, we've all had a few dreams in our lives. Maybe some have had many dreams. The others, maybe we're just not too aware of it. But so in the dream, you know that in the dream you're moving around and you're seeing, and if you're having lunch, you're tasting, and you're smelling, and you're hearing. All the senses in the mind are operating internally. So it can operate externally in Vaishnava or internally in Tejasa. That's the point. And then number 5 is, the third aspect is deep sleep, prajna. Now note here, and we'll see all of us, we already all know this too, that in prajna, those instrumentations that otherwise were moving outward or were looking at stuff in the dream world, they are not operating in prajna. They have receded. So the verse itself here, when I read it to you, note that there's no mention made of those instruments. It's just not even mentioned. Why is it not mentioned? Because they're not operating at this level. The third aspect is deep sleep, prajna. Now remember, prajna is the name of the plane of reality. Deep sleep is what you and I do in that plane of reality. We do waking, and we do dreaming, and we do deep sleep, and we do them in different locations, so to speak, different levels. So we do them in the levels of Vaishnava, Tejas, and Prajna. The third aspect is deep sleep, prajna. In this state, there is neither desire nor dream. There's no active desires, and there's no dream playing out to fulfill the desires. In deep sleep, all experiences merge into the unity of undifferentiated consciousness. Everything has receded inward. In some sense, everybody already knows this, because we have a lived experience of going to bed and falling asleep. And you have some sense, it may not be totally clear like to a yogi as we advance through this, but we all have some sense of noticing all the lights go off, so to speak. Everything switches off. We turn inward. All of a sudden, we cannot see or smell or taste or touch or hear. Notice how sometimes there can be sounds in the room, and if you're really tired, maybe you're sitting there watching the TV movie with some other people in there, and all of a sudden you sort of nod off. Or we're sitting here having a satsang, and there's a matri over on the couch there, and next thing I know, her eyes are closed and a blanket's pulled up around her face and neck, and she's kind of gone. The instruments turned inward, and so I'm just saying we all know this.
Yeah, there was huge thunder, and you didn't hear it. A lot of people.
What?
Or there's huge thunder.
Oh, there's thunder, like when weather comes through. Yeah. Everybody hears it. And did you hear the storm come through last night? I say, no, I slept through it. Huh?
And then you say, no, I slept.
You say, no, I slept through it like a baby, and that's a perfect example. In this state, prajna, there is neither desire nor dream. Why is there no desire? Because at this level, all of our desires are in their latent form. They're in their latent form right now. See, I can do a little magic trick. I can awaken up a latent form right now. Ready to run an experiment? I wish you could all watch and hear this experiment. All I have to do is say, hot chocolate. And boy, you should see the smile come on the face of the matri.
I knew it was going to be fun.
So a couple minutes ago, she was absorbed in the green vegetable things that she's doing whatever with over there.
Trying to save them.
Huh?
Trying to save them. I'm going to freeze them.
She's going to save them and freeze them. But anyway, so all of a sudden, the sound vibration comes out. hot chocolate. It goes across the room. It goes through her conscious mind, her Vaishnava level, processes through the unconscious thinking mind called Tejasa, goes down to through those instruments, goes down to the level of prajna where deep memories are, and it stirs the memory of hot chocolate and it causes a reaction, and she smiles. And the little muscles here around her eyes tighten, and these muscles up here on the cheeks tighten. And there's this just beautiful expression of, oh, wow, hot chocolate. We'll have to go get one later. Huh? After we do this, we're going to go to the gym for a while and maybe stop by and get us a hot chocolate on the way back. What do you think?
Probably.
There's another big smile. And so that's how that works. In deep sleep, all experiences merge into the unity of undifferentiated consciousness. Everything's in latent state. The sleeper is filled with bliss and experiences bliss and can find the way to knowledge of the two preceding states. Can find the way to that knowledge if we have trained ourselves how to be conscious of deep sleep. Sounds very paradoxical, doesn't it? Sounds impossible, but that's exactly what happens. That's what prajna is about. Oops, I dropped my little thing there. Which leads us up to verse number 6. And this is where we are for today. So the experiencer of these states of consciousness is the Lord of all. Doesn't mean God. What the word Lord simply means that which is the overseer of another. So we say the Lord of the kingdom. You say, okay, the Lord of the kingdom is the king. It means the Lord is, I don't know if this is proper grammar, even in English. I don't talk very well. But the Lord is lording. You go into a business, the manager is managing. So this is the principle of this word. Doesn't mean that if we go to this level, we have found God. It's built in. It's how we operate.
Not yet Turiya. It is.
It's right on the fringe of Turiya. This and the next verse really are talking about Turiya. But here, the emphasis in this verse is whatever you call it. Just in a sense, whatever you call it, don't give it a name at all. Don't even need to think about it. Is that there's some consciousness that's operating out here in Vaishvanara. There's some consciousness that recedes inward, is operating in Tejasa, experiencing dreams. There is some consciousness that is even operating when we are in deep sleep, when we're at the prajna level. There is that one consciousness, and the experiencer of those three states of consciousness is the Lord of all. It's the one that is the overseer of those three. This one is all-knowing. This one directs everything from within. So all of this that I'm doing out here, all of this that we're expressing out there is being directed by this Lord within, this manager from within, so to speak. This one is the womb of all. The womb, like a female womb. And there's a term, Hiranyagarbha. This plane of reality is sometimes called Hiranyagarbha, which is a terminology that I just absolutely love. It translates as the golden womb. I don't know which part of that word is gold and which part is womb, but it's the golden womb. So imagine that it's a metaphor, that it's the womb. It's like the sun is being the womb of everything that's manifesting out from it. This is the womb of all. All things, all objects originate from and dissolve into this. This is the Vaishnava Tejasa Prajna. All of it have emerged outward from this. Pretty neat, isn't it? Inika wants hot chocolate too.
505 Cooper Drive.
505 Hooper Drive. You have to come and get it, Inika. But maybe
How's that come through the subtle realm? Anyone else want?
so she's going to send subtle realm hot chocolate. But wait a few months and maybe you can get a Vaishnavar hot chocolate. I want a Vaishnavar hot chocolate. You can have a Tejasa hot chocolate, but it's not the same as a Vaishnavar hot chocolate. Now, actually, playing with that notion, this is one of the reasons that explains the notion of what's commonly called reincarnation. Why? Because we have latent desires at the prajna level. They want to express themselves. And so some experiences, like a really good hot cup of hot chocolate, you got to have it out here in Vaishnavar. You can have a dream about it, but it's just not quite the same thing. Anyway, this one is the womb of all. All things originate from and dissolve into this. That's the verse. Then let's see what Swami Rama has to say about this to explain this to us. When in meditation and contemplation, the aspirant experiences gradual and progressive steps of unfoldment through the waking, dreaming, and sleeping realities. Very important words there to keep in mind. When in meditation and contemplation, the aspirant experiences gradual and progressive steps of unfoldment through the waking, dreaming, and sleeping realities, he comes to know that he has not unfolded himself to that extent from which he can comprehend the knowledge of these three states collectively. Hadn't quite got there. To attain the collective knowledge of all these states, he attains a higher level, which is the Turiya we're talking about, exactly as a mountain climber who, when he climbs to the top of the mountain, can have comprehensive vision of that which is up above, down below, and behind the mountain. Now, I will add here a comment to say that, okay, so you haven't gotten to the level of Turiya where you are able to literally observe all three of them at the same moment. You hear that and you read it and you say, wow, that sounds pretty far out. I don't know if I know how to do that. But in the meantime, we can practice conscious awareness of Vaishnavar, this plane of waking here. We can experiment and explore the subtle realm of Tejasa, the dream reality. We can explore and play with the prajna level, and gradually through inference, our wisdom of buddhi, those instruments, starts to infer the truth of this stuff. We start to see, okay, I may not be there yet. I may not yet be Krishna-like, Buddha-like, Christ-like, Shankara-like, whoever. I may not be there yet, but this is making sense to me. It's getting clearer and clearer and clearer, and this becomes the inspiration to keep going. Let me just keep going because I actually really am understanding this stuff. And you may sort of laugh at yourself and look in the mirror. How the hell am I saying that? I'm understanding this. I'm nobody. I'm no great sage, but gee, I'm understanding this stuff. And so you look at yourself in the mirror and playfully said, and this is me speaking, playfully said, give yourself a pat on the back. This is called progress. This was the thing that said, first sentence, gradual and progressive steps of unfoldment. After attaining Turiya, or the fourth state of consciousness, the aspirant can witness the three states of consciousness separately and collectively both. When one experiences all the states of consciousness, then he establishes himself in his essential nature, pure consciousness, and realizes that he is the all-knower. There's that sequence I was saying before. He establishes himself in his essential nature, pure consciousness. Then I'll insert the word then. And then he realizes that he is the all-knower. That's where you first seek to know the Atman, and then coming off of that, you realize, wow, this is all one ocean. Instead of I'm just a little meager wave all of a sudden you feel, wow, I am a wave. I am a wave. And behold, my true nature is ocean, and I am one with the ocean. It's that kind of thing. Then, there more comes, see, then, even after that, then he acquires the knowledge that the pure consciousness flows on various degrees and grades, which are termed waking, dreaming, and sleeping. It's the one consciousness that operates outward as sleeping, operates outward as dreaming, and then manifests out here as the waking state of reality that is operating through a physical body and a brain and a nervous system out in this world out here. And we start to see that increasingly. These states or modes of consciousness have arisen from their source, Turiya, and finally dissolve into it. And it's existing right now. You and I have emerged outward so that we can be here and have a conversation. And yes, we are out here. Yes, there is a body here. And so me as a me like this, sweet as I am, cute as I am, and I'm here. Here I am. Here you are. We are out here. But literally at the same time, at this very moment, all of these levels of Vaishnara, Tejas, and Prajna are operating, and Turiya, the Atman, the pure consciousness, is here and operating right now. Wow. These states or modes of consciousness have arisen from their source, Turiya, and finally dissolve into it. Period. Yet, the nature of pure consciousness, which is self-existent, never changes. Self-existent means that it is not dependent on something else. This piece of paper is not self-existent. The image on this thing is not self-existent. It requires the piece of paper. The piece of paper requires a paper factory to make the paper. It requires an ink factory to make the ink. It requires trees to grow in the ground so that they can make the paper out of the trees. The trees require soil and water and nutrients and sunlight so that the tree can grow, so they can cut them down and make the paper and make the card and put the ink on it to make this thing here. It does not have its own existence. Self-existing, yet the nature of pure consciousness is self-existent. It's not depending on something else prior to it. My body operating out here, my brain, everything about me that's operating out here is not self-existent. It depends upon these unconscious processes going on in here. If I did not have a memory, if I did not have prana or some other version of life force explanation, then I would not be able to operate out here talking with you. But pure consciousness is self-existence. There's nothing prior to it. This is one of the points of huge demarcation between what the yogis have discovered by exploring from within and looking out, and the materialist scientists. I don't mean this personally as a criticism to just complain about them and say we're right and they're wrong. I don't mean to do that. The intelligence that we have in our modern world is absolutely amazing. The scientific revolutions are just absolutely astounding. But in the neurosciences, a lot of these scientists claim that consciousness is secondary, that consciousness emerged out of inert dead matter, that materiality is the ground and consciousness somehow, they don't have an explanation for it, somehow emerged out of it. It comes from, in the 1990s, one scientist man was giving a lecture somewhere, and he was talking about science, and he gave an explanation. He said, we science, we have solved a lot of the simpler mysteries of science. You go back to Newton and the apple fell out of the tree, we discovered gravity. This is a relatively simple discovery. He said, but now we are faced with a hard problem. The hard problem, he explained, is we don't know what consciousness is. We can't figure it out. And when he gave that talk, the phrase caught on and became a very popular term. That is hard problem. You can Google the term hard problem and find discussions about it and explanations. The hard problem is, where does consciousness come from? Now, science, much of science, except for the few that are very open to something deeper that they don't know about, say that consciousness emerged out of matter, that the animal form came totally out of soil. There's no such thing as consciousness as self-existent. But the yogis observe that there is a self-existent reality and that it has moved outward so that there can be a me and a you out here. So again, the sentence Swami Rama says, his way of putting it, that everything had arisen from the source Turiya and finally dissolved into it. Yet the nature of pure consciousness, which is self-existent, note that, never changes. It is everlasting, infinite, and changeless. It's a little bit like saying, relatively speaking, the electricity thing here that operates my computer, the electricity is self-existent. The laptop that I'm using right now to talk to you is not self-existent. It is absolutely, totally, essentially dependent upon this electricity. If it doesn't get this electricity, it can't run. So I think I'll plug it back in. There, now see, now the computer's happy. Now it has electricity. The computer then thinks that it's self-existence and loses sight of the fact that there's electricity plugged into the side. And this is what you and I do. We have fallen asleep out here in Vaishnavar and think that I am supreme. That's ego speaking. It's one of those instruments. But in fact, my existence is dependent upon pure consciousness. That's the point that's being made here. Self-existent, and it never changes in the same spirit that the electricity coming into the computer, it's pure. It has not changed into form. It's not turned into sound or light or processing in a microchip. It's not doing anything. It's just pure electricity. When the aspirant strengthens his practice of meditation and contemplation and learns to, listen to this, analyze and resolve all his desires, thoughts, and feelings through the practice of, get ready for this, yoga nidra, he attains a state in which he consciously learns to place his mind in deep rest. This is what yoga nidra is about. It's how to recede inward from Vaishvanar, to recede inward from Tejasa, and to recede back to the level of prajna and to riya. This is what yoga nidra is about. In dhyana, or meditation, or if you like, Raja Yoga, the meditation that we talk about with Yoga Sutras, in our regular meditation, we don't go to deep sleep and stay awake. We remain in the conscious state of mind and allow the unconscious to come forward. The experience is that it's coming forward to me. And then there's an expansion that happens like this. So meditation is done in the waking state. Yoga nidra is done by leaving the waking state, receding inward through the dreaming, not visualizing dreams, because we're going right through that plane of Tejasa and we're coming down to the level of deep sleep. And everything is merging back into where it came from. And in some sense, every human being already knows this because we have the personal direct experience of falling asleep. And when we fall asleep, when we go to bed, what are we doing? Our waking state activity out here is merging back into that from which it came. We may not have a language for what the name of that is, but we all know that in the morning, I'm coming from somewhere and I open my eyes and it's as if I'm being reborn again today. And I emerge outward and I get out of bed and I say, good morning, Jeff. Hi, Nellie. Hello, Indica. Isn't it a nice, wonderful day? I have just emerged outward from somewhere, and at the end of the day, we say Huyanak, we say good night, and we lay down, and we all merge back into where we came from. Every one of us already knows that. That's the basic spirit, the basic theme of what we're talking about here, in which he consciously he learns to analyze all desires, thoughts, and feelings. Now, to do that, we just simply have to practice over and over and over. And how to analyze and resolve desires, thoughts, and feelings through Yoga Nidra when you're asleep. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But some of you played with Yoga Nidra and you've started to get a sense of what this is about. How to be laying there, not moving at all, and virtually in deep sleep, and not sitting there having dreams that are filled with emotional responses and all, but the slightest little fragments of memories. There's a little fragment of an anger or a fragment of an attachment or a seeming unexplainable but yet present sense of fear of the loss of something, but there's no something there that you're afraid of losing. Is pure consciousness the same as Atman? Yes. It's just in the attempt, as you know, Jeff, in the attempt to talk about this stuff, different words come out of the mouth, different words come out of Swami Rama to write it down on the page here for us. And so all of it's an effort to talk about this, to have a conversation about something that cannot be talked about. And yet we're stuck with that. We have to talk about it anyway. If we don't communicate, then each one of us has to literally rediscover all this wisdom. But if we attempt to talk about it, if we attempt to write books and put it down, and somebody long time ago attempted, the rishis of unknown name, summarized the whole thing in 12 verses so that then people over generations could talk about those 12 verses. Somebody came to have direct experience, understand it, and then sits there. The name Naranji is one. I wish I could have met the fellow. Naranji was an old man Swami that Swami Rama has talked about, that in Swami Rama's youth, Naranji, I guess he was Swami Naranji, was in the cave in the mountains. And Swami Rama has spoken of how difficult it was for him, the young Swami Rama, to learn from his own teacher, because he loved him so much, he put him up on a pedestal, he couldn't learn from him. And so who did he learn from? Naranji, who was just an old man Swami who was illiterate. He said the man couldn't even write his own name, but he had grown up doing yoga. He had been doing this stuff and he understood it. And so the Swami Rama we know said that when he was a young Swami Rama and he and his younger buddies would get confused over something, they would go to Naranji and say, Naranji, would you explain it to us? And he would sit there and explain it to them and write with a stick, on the ground, draw little pictures on the ground. And so this stuff was memorized as 12 verses and then gets talked about a lot. And then comes books and all this, and then comes internet, and here comes Facebook and Facebook Live and the Be Live. And so we can sit here and do like we are right now and have a conversation. You're right on time, Rosalind. So we can sit and have a conversation like this. All we're doing is we're talking about this stuff, and it cannot be talked about, which I know you know, Jeff. And so is pure consciousness the same as Atman? Yes, of course it is. And it's the same as the metaphorical electricity that I pulled the thing out here on the computer. See, there it is. That's the symbol. This is the symbol. This is the symbol of Atman. This is the symbol of pure consciousness. And I'll plug it back in just so that the battery doesn't die out and I go away. Yoga Nidra cannot be translated into any other language, but for the convenience of modern students, it is called, quote, yogic sleep, or, quote, sleepless sleep. This is a state of conscious sleep, not conscious dreaming, conscious sleep, in which the student is in deep sleep and yet remains fully conscious. Only evolved minds that are fully conscious and use methods of meditation and contemplation attain this state. Not everybody does it. We all can, but not everybody does. Yoga Nidra is a very useful way to enjoy a voluntary sleep, unlike ordinary sleep. The yogis, listen to this, the yogis use this technique for sleep and meditation both. Thus, it is called Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is an advanced practice that can help the student to come out of sloth and inertia, which are the greatest enemies of the student and which obstruct his progress every now and then. The quality of rest one receives through this method is entirely different from that which is derived through ordinary sleep. Note here that he said that Yoga Nidra is an advanced practice. Note here that saying that it's an advanced practice does not mean that one cannot start it early and immediately. You can. I made a Yoga Nidra CD. Most of you know it. It's out on the public market, and it's been there's probably I have no idea what the actual number is now. Probably somewhere between 50 and 100,000 copies of that are out there that I know of, not the ones that have been copied and shared, which is fine with me. So there's a lot of people, everybody can start to experiment. The thing that makes it correct to say, and it's an advanced practice, is that one may play with this practice for months, maybe years, before finally deciding to actually really start doing it. And so the advancement comes with practice. It's not advanced like, well, no, you're not ready to try to do that. Everybody can do this. And just initially, it doesn't go very deep, usually. It can. There's no actual reason that it cannot go deep soon. But in the practical world, it usually does not, because we don't know it's possible. So we end up confusing it. There are now many, many, many Yoga Nidra CDs out there. And so somebody says, I'm going to create a Yoga Nidra CD for headaches or something like that. So we end up with headache Yoga Nidra or things like that. I've forgotten the names of these things. And where Yoga Nidra is considered to be anything that is simply relaxing to the conscious mind, with no mention made whatsoever about the plane of reality called prajna, or conscious deep sleep. So the creators of these CD guided things have no idea what they're talking about. They do not know the depth. And I don't mean to say that just to be insulting people, but it's the nature of what we're talking about. Here, Swami Rama is using the phrase advanced. Yoga Nidra is an advanced practice that can help the student come out of sloth and inertia, blah, blah, blah. Going on. The Yoga Nidra is a revitalizing exercise that gives total rest to the mind, brain, nervous system, senses, and body. Except through meditation and Yoga Nidra, one cannot give rest to the totality of mind. Note he says through meditation and Yoga Nidra. It means what we want to do is do both. Practice meditation, yes, practice meditation. Remain in the conscious waking state mind, allow the body to be still, allow the breath to be smooth, allow the conscious mind to become still, like no waves on the lake of mind, and then intentionally allow the unconscious to come forward and an expansion occurs. But we're starting out, we're in the waking state and we're remaining in the waking state. That's for the meditation piece. Contemplation, we're using the mind to ponder, to brood, to think about, to reflect upon the nature of these levels of consciousness that we're talking about. And then we lay down and we do Yoga Nidra. We recede, we merge back inward, we leave the waking state behind. We leave the senses behind. We go through the dreaming state. We're not doing lucid dreaming. We're going beyond dreaming. And we're coming to the prajna level where you and I are doing deep sleep, but paradoxically, we're doing it consciously. So we do contemplation. We practice contemplation. We practice meditation, and we practice yoga nidra. This is the point being made here. Except through meditation and yoga nidra, one cannot give rest to the totality of mind. As body, brain, and conscious mind need rest, similarly, there is a necessity for resting the unconscious mind. There is no drug and no scientific or physical technique so far discovered that gives rest to the unconscious part of mind except the technique of yoga nidra. Around 1970, Swami Rama submitted himself as a research subject to the Voluntary Controls Research Project, which was being conducted at the Menninger Foundation in Kansas in the U.S. The research scientists had Swami Rama laying on a bed, table, gurney sort of thing, had him hooked up to brainwave measuring stuff and all this. And they're good scientists, so they had tape recorders going on of what was going on in the room. Swami Rama went to sleep. The story goes, he was laying there snoring, asleep. And the scientists were talking. They were looking at their measurements as this yogi's laying there sleeping. And then Swami Rama stirred and sort of came back. He sort of woke up to them. And then he started reciting back to them word for word the conversation they were having while he was asleep. Now this is, we all know it, this is impossible. This cannot happen. So the scientists, like when you watch it, this is me speaking, when you see a magician do a stage trick on there, the natural question that you're going to ask the musician, it comes out of your mouth automatically, is telling the secret of the trick. So what did these scientists say to Swami Rama when he just did the impossible? How did he do this? How is he telling us what we said when we know he was asleep? He was laying there snoring, and the brainwave said, this dude is gone. But they naturally said, how did you do this? He gave them a simple, honest answer. He said, my brain was asleep, I was awake. Because there's consciousness. Consciousness emerges outward through brain. This is what the yogis discovered. The scientists know this is not possible because they already know, in their opinion, that consciousness emerged out of matter. My phone is ringing, but I'm going to ignore it. It's in the other room in there. Be quiet, phone. There, thank you. It just gave up. Anyway, so he answered them back that way. They didn't hear, so they just brushed it off. And so instead of the scientists saying, oops, wait a minute, maybe my paradigm, maybe my worldview needs to be shifted. Maybe this dude knows something I don't know. Maybe instead of that happening, say, please, sir, can you keep talking? Can you explain this? Can you show? Instead of doing that, they sort of brushed it off. And it wasn't too much later, he quit doing that research with them because they weren't listening. It was pointless. There was no instrumentation that had the capability of measuring that which is coming from these subtler levels of turiya and prajna. The physical instruments, they operate out in the plane called Vaishnavar. They operate out here. The computer operates out here in Vaishnavar. The measuring equipments that measure EEGs, brainwaves, are out here in the plane called Vaishnavar. All of this stuff out here in Vaishnavar operates out here. It simply cannot go to these subtler levels. It's why it is true. It's not a religious belief. It's not a philosophy that from out here, you simply cannot. You must, if you want to know it, you must go there yourself and have the internal direct experience. There's no escaping that reality as far as anybody knows. And I say that just like that. So who knows? Maybe somehow, some way, somebody will make a machine that is able to measure the subtle from which the machine emerged. It doesn't seem to work that way. Yes, the meditation CD is helpful. It's a sneaky thing, Anjin. The trick of the guided practice is what it's doing is it's leading your consciousness in a systematic way. Notice that you're moving around your body this way, 3 dimensions, up, down, forward, backward, left, right. And then as it moves subtler, then it drops the left-right dimension and you're moving only up and down. It's very sneaky. And then it deposits your attention on a point here and a point here and a point here. And then the voice in the recording and says basically, and now empty, 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 and go into conscious deep sleep. So we're going from 3 dimensions down to 2 dimensions, down to 1 dimension, and then down to 0 dimensions, and boom. It's a sneaky trick. And then what happens is you fall into deep sleep consciously. So yes, the recordings, the guided practices are useful. And it's only because of what I just said and what you're saying. That's the reason I finally made that thing, whatever it was 15 years ago, of realizing that very nice, wonderful people, very sincere, didn't know how to do this. Prior to that, I was very opposed to recorded guided practices because I had come to see that no, it is an internal process. It cannot be done from out here. And then I came to realize, no, the guidance is just a sneaky trick. And that if a person will hang out with it long enough, eventually somewhere along the way, they will fall into conscious deep sleep. So yes, it's very useful. Yes. Thank you. And I'm glad you like it. Anyway, let me go on here. Yoga Nidra is unlike sleep because sleep gives only partial rest, and because in sleep one withdraws one consciousness and becomes unconscious. Yoga Nidra is unlike meditation because in meditation one does not seek conscious awareness of the state of deep sleep. In meditation one does not seek conscious awareness of deep sleep. It is somewhat difficult for the modern mind to comprehend all the levels of one inner being and to attain the goal of meditation. This is very difficult to comprehend. We're sitting there, we're hanging out. This is, this conversation we're having today is the 6th verse plus about 4 conversations going through the introduction. So we've been together probably a total of nearly 10 hours going through this. This stuff is very difficult to comprehend. So if you're finding it difficult, don't feel bad. Please don't beat up on yourself. If you're still chanting mantra, Brecht, you are in the waking state or the dreaming state. You cannot take words with you. Words will not come along for the ride. What you're saying, what you're posing question there is a very, very common question. It's relevant only in the plane called Vaishnava. It's relevant in the plane called Tejasa. But in the plane called Prajna and in the reality called Turiya, the syllables cannot come along for the ride. And the karmendriya of speech, the ability of me to speak, cannot go along for the ride. It must be surrendered. So is mantra required? Not only is it not required, you cannot take it along. It simply will not go along. It just won't go along for the ride. During meditation, one learns to practice a meditation pose that is steady and comfortable, but in Yoga Nidra, the corpse posture, Shavasana alone, is recommended. Yoga Nidra supports and strengthens the meditation technique. The attempt to fall into conscious deep sleep and do Yoga Nidra is a help to our meditation, which is done in Vaishnava in the waking state. They go hand in hand. They help one another, but they are not exactly the same. Deep meditation helps the mind attain one-pointedness, while contemplation leads one to the state of constant awareness. It's just another two sentences that we keep running into over and over and over. Now, our ego-based operating mind loves to fight this comment, loves to resist this. I don't want to do meditation and contemplation. I only want to do meditation. Or somebody says, I read a book and I'm a jhana yogi. All I do is thinking. I don't want to do meditation, and this yoga nidra business is a total waste of time. I compassionately do understand that, but it's bad thinking. The suggestion is practice contemplation, practice meditation, and practice yoga nidra. And if we attempt them all, then the fruits are unbelievable. Yoga nidra has immense benefits and can be used for learning the subtleties of life. The dimensions of life that are not explored during waking, dreaming, and sleeping can be explored through yoga nidra or by attaining the fourth state. Now, I cannot support that sentence for you. I'm sorry. I cannot explain that to you in a way in which your conscious waking state, conscious mind will understand. I am not capable of doing it. Swami Rama is not capable of doing it. No yogi in history is capable of doing that. Vyasa, who wrote the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata, that lineage, cannot do it. Patanjali cannot do it. All anybody can do is be a signpost and say, go this way. And here are some ways that you can start to do this. But we have to do it ourselves. The dimensions of life that are not explored during waking, dreaming, or sleeping can be explored through yoga nidra or by attaining the fourth state. It is interesting to note that the frontiers of waking, dreaming, and sleeping are not explored or understood. Bad news, friends, it's entirely up to you whether you want to explore them. No one practices enough to explore these frontiers because researchers seem to be interested in exploring the world of objects and gross thought patterns and symbols only. But it is also important to, he says nicely, there's a sentence there, it's a really pretty insulting, nasty sentence if he said it in 5 pages worth of this, but it's very simple, it's there. But it's also important to explore the process by which the waking mind slips to the dreaming state and then goes to sleep. That's up to each of us to do, and we can choose to do it or not. You didn't say this, Brecht, but a common thing we can just say, I don't need to do that. We're in the Kali Yuga, and all I need to do is chant the name of Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, that's the only thing we can do. Well, if we believe that, or all I can do is say, oh, Jesus save me, Jesus save me. If that's all we're going to do, we simply deprive ourselves of these levels of insight. But it rests with each one of us. It is difficult to study how the conscious mind withdraws itself and goes to the lap of the unconscious state. Only by practicing yoga nidra can one do this. Now, you may disagree with that sentence, but it is accurate. I'm saying it is an accurate statement. And you're stuck with that fact. Only by practicing yoga nidra can you do this. And that is entirely up to each one of us as an individual. I've told you earlier that my simple instruction from Swami Rama came after I had made a decision. The dude made an offer to me. He said, you're on the path, I will lead you. And if you follow the instructions, you will get that which you're saying that you're seeking, and the obstacles will be removed. And so his instruction to me about yoga nidra was walking down the hall one morning as we crossed paths, and this deep voice comes out. He said, you should do yoga nidra. And I thought to myself, right, I thought, oh, shit. This stupid practice called yoga nidra and these 61 dumb points, this is ridiculous, makes no sense. But now I've been told to do it. And this is what we're saying here. It can only by practicing yoga nidra can one do. In this practice, the student learns to witness his body by withdrawing his conscious mind voluntarily. The student first learns to train his willpower by building his determination, sankalpa shakti, and then determines to voluntarily go to a state of deep sleep and come back to the fully conscious state according to his will. Careful, I'm going through this not slowly here now because it's pointless to go slow, because the real bottom line is, do you want to, if you're already practicing Yoga Nidra and you know the value, then keep doing what you're doing. And if you have not, then you've either made a decision to not do it, or you're still resisting in some way. We created an online Udemy course. You can go through that. It's my best shot at trying to explain it to you. So go through it, and then there's 4 or 5 different MP3 files on there to guide you through the practice. But that's my best shot as a contribution to humanity, to try to say, here's what Yoga Nidra is about. So if you haven't been through it and you're curious, go through it. Careful vigilance and observation lead the student to study the incoming thoughts from the unconscious mind. If you want to know what that means, do it. The yogis recall all their samskaras, watch them, examine, and even select and reject them according to their need. Those thought patterns that are disturbing are rejected by the yogis, and those that are helpful are strengthened. Many students of the occult and psychic phenomena may accidentally touch this state of mind, but they do not know the definite way of experiencing the same state again, and they cannot recall this experience repeatedly. A deep study of these 3 states, waking, dreaming, and sleeping, reveals that with the help and practice of Yoga Nidra, one can go beyond all the levels of the unconscious. There's a little guidance here. I think I'm going to not go through this, because I've created the other thing which goes into greater depth of how to do this. Does add here, learn to divest yourself of thoughts, feelings, and desires, but see that you do not touch the brink of sleep. The space between the 2 breaths, which is called Anahata Chakra, is the center where the mind rests during this practice of Yoga Nidra, which I guide you in if you'll go through that. So it's the best offering I have of how to actually do the practice of Yoga Nidra. And talking about the theory, so to speak, of how to do it, it's just about, I would say just about, impossible to describe. It actually is impossible to describe. We try. And keep using it. That's all we can do. Keep using. And remember, you're not doing that recording or any recording to remain totally dependent on a recording. I'm not saying I'm not saying wean yourself off it and stop using it. That's not why I'm going with that. But practice going to the state, and then you'll notice that when you lay down on your couch, you're increasingly gaining the ability to just, earlier we read a comment Swamiji said there, that we need to be able to go into Yoga Nidra at will. It means you just plop down, bang, there I go. I just recede inward. I fall asleep but stay awake. You can do this. Every one of us can do this. Every one of us can do this. So use the recordings. Read the books. Go through the course that we made. Do these things out here in Vaishnava, in the waking state, to understand what it's about. And then lay down and do it. Play the recording. Follow the instructions. Remember, it's not an idea that you're allowing my nice little voice to hypnotize you. Don't accidentally do that. When it says that you're moving your attention from this point to this point to this point, move your attention there. It's your attention that is important. It's not my voice that's in your ear. That's not the important part. It's just a means of being with you to say, move your attention there to this place. If it says be aware of your right knee, it's down there. I can feel my right knee. I can feel my toes. I had a conversation with a man who has a PhD in physiology, was writing a book. He's no longer with us. I mean, he left the body years ago. He published a book on the anatomy of Hatha Yoga. Was a friend of mine. And I was having trouble internally finding one of my toes. And one day at lunch, I asked him, because he knows physical anatomy and he's a shiatsu trained person. He's a very bright fellow. I thought he'd have the answer to this. I was curious if my middle toe was related to, when they talk about energy meridians, if it was related to an organ structure or something, because I was wondering why I was having trouble finding that toe with my attention. I asked him about it. And he sat back in his chair. We were having lunch together. And just all of a sudden he exclaimed something like, "Oh my God," it was something like that. He said, "I just realized I've been doing it wrong." This is a very, very bright man, very high IQ, very intelligent. And he said, "I just discovered I've been doing it wrong because I was carefully framing my question to him." And what he suddenly realized was that what he had been doing for several years of trying to practice yoga nidra, what he had been sitting there doing was sitting up in his head thinking about the concept of toes. You with me? I'm thinking about my toes. My toes are down there. I'm up here in my head thinking about toes, which are down there. If I take a pin, a needle or a pin, and I go down and I stick you in the toe with that pin, you will go, "Ouch." And if I do that, you will not be thinking about your toe down there. You will be experiencing your toe. You know what I'm saying? And so this was his acknowledgement, because he suddenly had this insight that for years he's so intelligent, so in his head thinking about everything. Very brilliant man, close friend, and I respected him greatly. I'm not complaining about him. But he suddenly realized, I've been doing it wrong for years. I've been in my head thinking about toes instead of actually putting my awareness in the toes. And this is what we're trying to do. Be curious. Snoop around inside. When you go through these points, put your attention on that point. Be in that point. Snoop around in there. Come to know waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. This is what we're actually trying to do with Yoga Nidra. The recordings are aids. That's what they are. It's a sneaky way of moving your attention inward. Play with it. Play with it. But please. Please. Yes, Rosalind, please. Play with it. Play, play, play. And cultivate your sense of curiosity. It said, this is not a religious comment. It says somewhere in the Western Bible that you have to approach God with the mind of a child. The child's mind. Look at what do parents do with toddlers who are at the crawling around stage? They put little locks on cabinets and things because they know that the child is into everything. You have to put things high. You have to lock them up because the little child will get into everything. The little child has unbelievable curiosity, just tremendous, tremendous curiosity. And we still have that in us. We still have that in us. And I'm saying to you, follow the techniques, read the books, go through the Udemy course that we made. There's some download PDF files there that help to describe this stuff. And there's, I think, 5 downloadable MP3 guided practices. Use these things. They're tools. They're meant to be used. But please be curious. Be naturally curious like the child. And it says, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this, but I am going to explore my unconscious mind. Somehow I'm going to figure out how to fall asleep and stay awake. Sounds crazy to me, but somehow I'm going to do this. And just keep experimenting and be curious and play. Okay? To be continued. Next is verse 7. And it starts with Turiya is the 4th state. So it's kind of an extension of what the part was today. But this part today was sort of a bridge between Prajna and Turiya. The next one is verse 7 of 12. To be continued. Promise me that you will play and be curious. Please, I beg of you. If there's anything that I've ever written or spoken that you have found useful, and some part of you says, boy, what can I do? Maybe I can go to the ashram and pull weeds or do something like that. If you want to do something for me, do this. I beg of you, do this. That's what I care about. Do this. Be curious. Use your curiosity. Be curious about your own levels of consciousness. Meditation, contemplation, and yoga nidra. And just play. Okay? So bye-bye. We're going to go take a walk and go to the gym and go get Matri a hot chocolate. She didn't hear me say that. Or she's ignoring me.
Will you play game of non-attachment?
Yeah, a game of non-attachment. She heard me after all. She was trying to pretend that she didn't hear me say hot chocolate, but she did. Somebody in the office in there heard me say hot chocolate. Hot chocolate. Bye-bye all. Enjoy your hot chocolate and your yoga nidra. And remember that it's all to be found in the silence after the Om.